Hi, I'm Tom Neiman. This is Midco Sports Magazine. This is the 21st edition of this program, and it just happens to coincide with number 21, the big ticket, Kevin Garnett, coming back to play for the Minnesota Timberwolves. We have a story coming up on the original pro team in Minnesota and how 54 years ago, a hero pilot landed a plane in a blizzard in the middle of the night in a cornfield near Carroll, Iowa, and saved the Minneapolis Lakers. And we will introduce you to the sport of cyclocross, part mountain bike race, part obstacle course, and 100% adrenaline. That story coming up in a bit. But we start with another kind of race and a story of almost unbelievable grit and human perseverance. It's a 135-mile trek through the hills and the woods in Minnesota, about as far north as you can get without stepping over the international border. You can either bike the 135 miles, you can ski it, or in the case of one young woman from Fargo, North Dakota, you can try and finish it on foot. Here is Jay Elson with the story.
In the hours before dawn on this brisk January morning, headlamps and flashing safety lights break through the darkness as 154 competitors, a combination of runners, bikers, and skiers, embrace the last bits of comfort they'll know for the next 60 hours.
It's always interesting the morning of, because, you know, you brush your teeth, you wake up in a warm bed, and it's kind of like, okay, this will be the last time I'll do this for the next couple of days.
They gather at the starting line of the 11th annual Arrowhead 135, an ultra marathon in International Falls, Minnesota, a town that routinely registers the coldest temperatures in the lower 48, and whose nickname, the Icebox of the Nation, taunts these athletes.
We've had just brutal cold. I think my first year in 55 hours, it was above 0 1 hour. You know, we've had 35 below plus and wind.
1 minute.
At 135 miles, this race is long, difficult, and bitterly cold. With an average finish rate of 47%, it's known as one of the 50 toughest races in the world.
This race you sign up in September, right? So you have no idea what the weather could be. It could be, I mean, this could be the 22% finish rate year, right? You don't know that when you sign up. And some guys, that's what they hope for, because, hey, I want to be one of those 22%, or you know what, if I'm not, I was there and this is what happened and this is my story.
Release the hounds!
When you leave International Falls, you will virtually not see a house till you get to the finish line.
The course follows the Arrowhead State Trail through the hilly, dense forests of northern Minnesota. There are only 3 checkpoints between International Falls and the finish line in Tower, Minnesota. Only 3 opportunities for racers to get food, water, and first aid if needed. You won't find cheering spectators lining the route. All motivation comes from within.
You have to learn how to survive cold for 60 hours at a shot. You have to be able to keep your mind right so that when the fatigue level gets so high, you're still eating, you're still drinking, you're still staying on the trail and navigating that.
This is Rachel Utek's second attempt at the race. Her first was 2 years ago when she got less than halfway through this grueling course.
It was just a blessing to be able to get as far as I did go, and just knowing that I'd come back.
Rachel's goal this time around isn't to win. In fact, she's still not sure she'll finish.
It's very rare to finish this race at your first try at it. A lot of people finish on their 3rd attempt.
Mentally, Utek plans to run this year's race in 4 parts, focusing on the next checkpoint rather than getting overwhelmed with the entire course.
I'll get to the first checkpoint, which is a gas station that they've generously opened up for us. We can grab a bite to eat there. I'll maybe stay like an hour max. Try to get dry feet again. This year it's going to be pretty warm, so new socks, maybe new shoes, that sort of thing.
Rachel prepares to leave the first checkpoint as night falls. She's in good spirits and knows she's getting closer to where her race ended in 2013.
I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm going to pass the spot that I DNF'd last time. So that should be a good celebration point for me. And then nighttime is when I run the best. So when you only have to follow the light of the headlamp, you don't see much more beyond that. It's kind of just really nice.
In this race, the rules are relatively few. There are no support crews, no pacers. The competitor is totally self-supported.
You can get disqualified if you accept help from anybody other than racers that are racing with you.
Racers must finish with the emergency gear and the 3,000 calories of emergency food they start with. All of it is packed onto the 35-pound sled they pull or push along the course.
It's a challenge in and of itself, but it's also really encouraging to know that you have everything you need behind you to survive, that if it gets cold, really cold, like you've got exactly what you need. You don't have to try to make it to that next spot to get something warm.
Rachel reaches the second checkpoint, known as Mel George, on the morning of the second day. This is where she'll get her first bit of sleep since starting the race.
And by sleep, I mean a long nap, because you don't want to get too far into a sleep cycle where your body just wants to keep sleeping.
Day 2 continues with a lot of the same. The trail can be beautiful, but it can also be lonely.
I mean, you're out in the sticks in the middle of winter and it's quiet, which I love. You've got these great woods all around you and that's great, but it's just a lot of times just you. And so you have to make sure that you're staying encouraged one way or another.
At 27, Rachel is one of the youngest Arrowhead competitors. She's also one of only 17 women in this year's field.
There's getting to be more, which I think is good. I think a lot of it's just as a community of women trying to get together and encourage one another that it isn't as scary as we might think.
As the second day ends, the terrain isn't the only obstacle UTEC is fighting.
It's like mile 80 something, I hit a pretty deep low. And I had to fight really hard to get back. Really, really hard. So a friend said that you can do everything right and just get one thing wrong, and that one thing wrong can make you not finish.
While mile 80 something could have very well been the end for Rachel, she's able to dig deep and find a little something more.
Hope is unstoppable. Like, it just doesn't end. You get to a low and it'll come right back.
In the end, Rachel didn't come in first. In fact, her name's not even among the top 10. But she is a finisher. And in the Arrowhead 135 community, there are no losers. Just those that DNF and those that manage to push themselves to the edge and cross the finish line.
I like to test to see what my limits are and going beyond what I think is possible for myself. Because you'll get to these points where you're just like, this is impossible. And then you break through that. And then once you've broken through that, it's like, okay, what else could be possible now?
All right, it's Jay Elson, everybody, and this is a great story. And just talk a little bit more about the conditions, just a little bit. It was a little warmer, really, than the competitors wanted this year?
Warmer, yeah. I mean, it was about 50 degrees warmer than normal this year. And you might think in a race like this, that would make life a little bit easier. But the racers actually say no. They say that cold, hard snow is a little bit more easy to maneuver on, whereas this stuff was acting a little bit more like sand and making life difficult.
All right. It was right around 30 degrees during the race?
Thereabouts, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jay Elson. Well, when we come back on Midco Sports Magazine, a plane and a blizzard and a cornfield and a pilot who saved the lives of 23 members of the Minneapolis Lakers. Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine. Well, this story has been told and retold about an event that is still fascinating 54 years after it happened. It's about a snowy night in January of 1960 and a pilot who saved the Los Angeles Lakers, and about a small town in Iowa that will forever be connected to one of America's most famous pro basketball teams.
I began flying during World War II. I joined the U.S. Army Air Corps and graduated from flying school in '44, and as a fighter pilot.
Harold Gifford is still kicking at 91 years old. He has held jobs as a charter pilot in Alaska and a crop duster in Montana. In 1959, he starts work for a company that flies the Minneapolis Lakers around the country. The Lakers aren't very good that year, but they do have future Hall of Famer Elgin Baylor. And Gifford becomes friends with a group of guys who will one day soon thank him for saving their lives.
These guys were just like wartime buddies, and they'd treat you that way. You know, you go to a bar, have a beer with them and stuff. We came to Madison Square Garden or the big Cobo Hall, Detroit, or wherever in Boston. They let me carry an equipment bag into the locker room, and then I'd get to go sit on the bench with them and watch these games.
The Lakers plane is a DC-3, first made in the 1930s, a twin-engine marvel at the time, but bare bones compared to modern commercial aircraft.
In those days, we didn't have autopilots, we didn't have radar, and we had to do it the hard way.
All of this has prepared Gifford for an eventful and what could have been disastrous nighttime flight in January of 1960. The Lakers have just played in St. Louis, and Gifford and co-pilot Jim Holznagel are getting ready for a routine return trip to Minneapolis.
We're messing around there trying to get the engines started and stuff, and it's starting to sleet just a little bit. Right shortly after takeoff, the lights flickered, bright, dim, out, dark.
So with no instruments or heat or electricity, they break through the cloud cover into a clear moonlit sky.
Okay, at that point, we don't really have much of a problem. All we have to do is get on top, pick up that North Star. I used to fly jets coming out of Oklahoma City. I put the North Star in the windscreen, and 45 minutes later, look down, there's the Twin Cities, you know. So it seemed like a piece of cake from that point on.
Only problem is the further north they fly, the higher the clouds get, and there's no oxygen on the plane. So they top out at 17,000 feet and go to plan B.
We'll fly west and with the front on our right and try to maybe find a hole in the clouds or a lower ceiling, but that didn't work out either.
They are nowhere near home, flying blind and already more than 5 hours into a trip that started with enough fuel for 6 hours. At some point, they have to turn the plane back north, and to avoid ice, they have to fly lower.
And boy, I'll tell you, that was tense. You know, it's a pretty critical decision. It's a life or death decision.
They drop the big plane down to under 200 feet off the ground.
And sure enough, all of a sudden, farmhouse, farmyard lights, you know, pretty soon barns and silos.
My dad remembers being woken up because a DC-3 flying very low. I've never had that experience, but it makes the house, some people remember the house shook when it went over their house. So a DC-3 is a very loud plane, and imagine one account references up to 9 times. The plane buzzed the town at least 9 times.
So the people in Carroll, Iowa turn on porch lights and yard lights and any lights they can to try and give Gifford something he can see to regain his bearings. Lakers coach Jim Pollard comes forward and suggests that Gifford try and land the plane in a cornfield. Gifford agrees. So they put the 25,000-pound plane down in a cornfield in a blizzard at 1:30 in the morning. Not a crash landing, a miraculous landing.
When we touched down and cut the engines, the loudest cheering and screaming that you could ever imagine in that confined cockpit. 23 people and everybody. Until that point, they're almost like someone on death row, not knowing whether they're going to make it through the night or not.
In 2010, on the 50th anniversary of the landing, the team and the town built and dedicated a basketball court near the spot in the cornfield where the plane touched down. Laker Court is now a tribute to Harold Gifford and the people of Carroll, Iowa.
We're proud to say we do the same thing today, and the connection to Little Carroll, Iowa to the Los Angeles Lakers. There is a connection there. A lot of people don't know it. And then some even go as far as saying the NBA. The NBA may have been 10, 15, 20 years delayed with all their success if it wasn't for the survival of the Lakers to be able to survive into the 1960-61 season because of Carroll, Iowa.
Well, who knows? Maybe Magic Johnson would have never worn a Lakers uniform had Harold Gifford not pulled off the miracle landing. He wrote a book about it in 2013. Lakers president Jeannie Buss has said that maybe the franchise would have folded had the players and the pilots all died that night. As it turns out, though, the Lakers became the first NBA team on the West Coast. They moved out there that same year in 1960, and the rest, from Jerry West to Wilt Chamberlain to Kareem and Kobe Bryant, is Lakers history. It's a cross between mountain bike racing and cross-country cycling. Take a few laps with these cyclocross racers when we come back. Well, South Dakota is better known for presidential faces than it is for bicycle races, more so for motorcycles in Sturgis than it is for a thing called cyclocross in Sioux Falls. But there is a growing group of hardcore fitness freaks that have found a competition that they love in this combination of biking and hiking.
Everybody lines up in a grid, usually 6 or 8 across, and you boom, take off, just like a motocross race, as hard as you can, flat out. You see people just riding their bikes as hard as you can, getting on and off.
Get over obstacles, barriers, run-ups.
Going through sand.
Off camber, down hills or up hills.
Grunting, screaming, crashing.
It's 60 minutes of as hard of an effort that you can give.
You do usually 2 laps. They time those 2 laps and project how many you'll do in an hour, and then they'll put up how many you have left. So oftentimes that's in an hour race, somewhere in the range of you'll do 9, 10, 11 laps.
Good job. Nice work.
My name is Patrick Lally. I started cyclocross racing, I think 5 years ago, when somebody from Sioux Falls, a guy named Chris Pearson, held a kind of renegade cyclocross race to raise money to build single track mountain bike park over at Leaders. I raced it on a single speed, fat bike, 1x1 Surly, 55-pound, I don't know, it was heavy. And I raced in the women's and children's division, and I got 3rd and thought I was going to throw up, and it was great. The sport of cyclocross really evolved in Europe in the early part of the 20th century, when the cycling craze was really taking over before cars really became prevalent in the development of the bicycle. People were racing bikes right away, and one of the things that they would do is race essentially from town to town. I'm going to go from Bruges to Ghent as fast as I can in Belgium in the winter. And they would run through fields and jump over fences and go through streams and everything else. And so that's kind of where it started, and it just, developed from there into a little bit more arranged and organized, but not much. And it still contains the same basic premise, which is it's a fall-winter sport. You race in mud and grass and dirt and anything else that is coming at you from rain and snow and all the elements on a closed track, and you have to go over barriers. What's left of what we thought of as fences, through mud, sand. It has kept that same flavor of sort of celebration and a good time. It's not really a team sport. We started a team to sort of help each other out. We try to get together once or twice a week just to work on those cyclocross bike handling skills. The more you do it, the better you get. It just has that, I'm just going to go do this and have a good time sense to it, and that really attracts people to it in a way that other bike racing or other sports don't. We have one of the best in the region, certainly, and one of the top riders in the country named Jeff Cluck. He's very strict about his training, and so he's at a very high level.
My name is Jeff Cluck. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is my 7th season of doing cyclocross. It was something that I started just to kind of get away from road racing, and it was up and coming in the US and looked fun. It was in the fall, it was on grass, dirt, in a park. Kind of got into it, tried it, liked it, was good at it, and kind of went from there. I like, that you're on kind of a modified road bike with wider tires, different gearing. disc brakes now. You know, the courses are usually, you know, especially how dry it's been this year, is, you know, it can be bumpy, it can be rough, it can be hard. You know, you're suffering through it in a sense, but everybody is. And it's kind of like, you know, that everyone's fighting through the kind of the same obstacles. And I don't know, it's just something about being competitive with other people, but also being competitive with yourself. That's where I think I just enjoy.
I was at a race with him this weekend, and he was in just a battle both days with a guy from Omaha named Mark Savory, who's a former age group world champion. And those guys were never more than about 10 feet apart for an hour, as hard as you can. And I think that that takes not just physical ability and training, you have to be mentally strong and very, very competitive. And Jeff has those qualities to hold your body at the absolute maximum for that period of time. You're overcoming a lot of physical and mental demons through that 60 minutes that many people can't do, frankly.
There is always a point where even if you could be winning the race, it goes through your mind that maybe I should, you know, I want to quit. This hurts, it's hard, maybe I should quit right now. It's just kind of, that's the fight I think that you go through, and whether it's a 60-minute race or whether it's a 4-hour road race or if it's a 10 or 12-hour triathlon, I'm sure those thoughts go through your mind, and it's just trying to be able to control that and focus on what you need to do, talk yourself out of it.
You have to be competitive to do well, because it's that competition, it's that drive that we all know, pushing your body farther than you knew you could. And that only comes from the art of competition. It's when you have to run a guy down before the finish of a race from, you know, 200 yards back, and your legs are screaming at you, and your head's throbbing, and there's sweat pouring off your head, and your lungs hurt like they've never hurt before. And you don't quit, because everything in your body is telling you to quit. And you don't, and you run that guy down. Nah, that's sport.